might be a bit of a weird analogy, but I'm quite interested in the kind of microbiome in the gut and the soil and the kind of relationship between the two. And I always think, like, if you go from eating hardly any fibre to suddenly having lots of fibre, we know the consequences of that. We get very bloated and gassy and uncomfortable. So it's the same on our farms. If your farms have kind of been getting lots of high input nitrogen, and that's what they say, that's the environment they're used to, and then all of a sudden you take that away and start using lots of different approaches, they're going to be like, that's too much overnight. And that's why, say, it's a biological, ecological, natural system that needs to be built up slowly for, say, the environment to adjust.
This podcast is brought to you by GroundShift. If you're anything like me, you've probably realised that doing things the way they've always been done doesn't always lead to better outcomes on the farm. And that's where GroundShift comes in. GroundShift is all about helping farmers rethink the way that they approach their soils, the inputs into their system, and improving their overall farm system performance. We focus on building resilience, improving efficiency, and ultimately creating more profitable farm systems. It's not always about throwing more into your system. Sometimes it's about understanding what's driving those results beneath the surface. So if you're serious about improving your farm's profitability and resilience, and utilising biology to drive your farm system performance, I highly recommend checking out groundshift.ag, and you can follow them online at groundshift.ag on Instagram. Welcome back to another episode of From the Soil Up podcast. Today's special guest is Karen Fisher from Ludlow in the UK. Karen is an independent farming advisor for Harvesting Potentials Consulting and Coaching, and I met her in my travels when I was in the UK a couple of months ago. So how are you today, Karen?
Hi, good morning. Yes, thank you for having me. So it's quite early still in the UK, but I'm doing good.
I appreciate you hopping on this morning. I know it's not quite the same as it is here. It's quite a bit later, but I'm really excited to have you on. I've had many people actually say you'd be a great guest, so I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. No, thank you very much.
So Karen, what first drew you to thinking about diversity in nature and diversity in people as, you know, being one and the same conversation rather than two separate issues?
Yeah, so I've worked, say, within this industry for 20 plus years now. I've always had an interest in, say, resilient food systems. Mm-hmm. So obviously I've worked in that area. I'm not from a farming background, which I thought initially was a disadvantage, but actually I've discovered over time that I came from it with no pre-ideas. I was very open to kind of learning and being curious about how different individuals approach different farming practices. I then, aged 39 later in life, in lockdown, like many, I think particularly women did, I had a late diagnosis of ADHD. So again, having this very curious brain, I did a big, say, deep dive into that and kind of what that meant and the struggles, but particularly the strengths as well. And I started to realise that actually nature thrives on diversity. So we need diversity in nature and farming. And that's also applicable to humans as well. Say diversity is nature's insurance policy. Make sure that we've got this, say, multiple integrated approach to how we do things, and to make sure that we've got all these different ideas that come together and they make things more resilient.
And so how do you define a system-led resilience model when it comes to farming? What does that look like in practice?
Yes, I think it's looking at making sure that you're looking at the root cause of something. So I think in more industrial farming systems, in conventional medicine, I think we've gone down a route of sticking plasters. So rather than looking at the root cause of something, we're just putting sticking plasters on. And I think particularly now we're seeing in farming those sticking plasters aren't working quite as well as they did when we first started doing them, say, previously. So for me, it is making sure you're getting that diversity in there, looking at the root of a problem. So, for example, if you've got particular weed issues on your farm, it's asking yourself, like, what is that weed telling me? So docks, for example, I think when I worked in New Zealand, I think we have similar weed names. So hopefully your listeners will know what a dock is. But again, very deep tap roots. If you've got docks, it's very likely that you've got compacted soil, and those are deep tap roots trying to break through that. So it's observing before you react to something.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of New Zealand farmers will be familiar with the dock. We do have the pleasure of a lot of your weed species being here as well and being very prevalent. Do you want to expand a little bit more on kind of what the weeds are trying to tell us And what does that mean for a resilient farm system?
Yes. So obviously, again, over time I work with farmers that basically are wanting to work with nature. So however you want to frame that, be it organic systems, regenerative, agroecological, but I think it's trying to get past that mindset that you need to have this squeaky clean farm with absolutely no crops on it apart from the cash crop that you're trying to grow, because every species is there for a reason and it's an indicator of something. So quite often the different weeds that you have across your fields and farm are telling you, say, potentially some issues with the soil or nutrients imbalance, or even sometimes that kind of ecological microbiome imbalance as well. So it's knowing what those weeds, again, are telling you, so then you could potentially, rather than just trying to spray those every year, because they will keep coming back, nature's very clever, is getting to the root cause of that and working towards resolving that. And I think it's never a case of having no weeds on your farm. It's that, so again, that's that economic balance, isn't it, of what's too detrimental for your yield, balances what brings that very important diversity to your farm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that economic part is what people can get lost in, and that actually having, too many weeds that are taking over everything, then you're not actually having an economic crop and you haven't really solved the root issue. So that's where chemicals can actually play a role. But I also do find it funny when people are telling me that they've got these great chemicals that are working really well and they've been using them for 20 years straight, but they're still trying to solve the same problem that they were trying to do 20 years ago. So is that chemical really working that well in that system?
Yeah.
I guess that comes back to your Band-Aid analogy, which I quite like.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. So for those who don't know much about who you are, Karen, can you please share a bit more about your background and what you do now?
Yes. So like I said, been, working in farming for over 20 years. So I'm very particularly interested in that kind of farmed environment. So being a productive farm, but alongside supporting nature. So I would say been a farm advisor. I'm a qualified agronomist as well. So you see, I feel that gives me a very good overview of both the chemical plant protection side and also that, working with nature for a whole farm system approach. I then, like I said, had this diagnosis and, typical ADHD brain, very curious, deep dive research, realised that a lot of the strengths and interests that I have were very applicable to both nature farming and people. So I decided to go and get myself qualified on top of all my farming qualifications and experience in coaching, but particularly for neurodivergent individuals, because anecdotally I have found, and not just myself, but there is anecdotal evidence out there, there's a lot more neurodivergent neurotype in agriculture because it really suits that brain type, the nervous systems, that being able to manage your own time, that innovation, varied work, managing your own diary. And even if you're the neurotype that prefers peace and quiet, you can obviously get a lot of that on the farm as well. So I suddenly realised that my two very special interests, which are a lifelong of resilient farming systems and psychology and human behaviour, I could bring those two things together. So now I seem to have carved myself a bit of a niche out of working particularly with women that are working with the land, juggling children, with running a household, and we're very good as ADHD women of saying yes to far too much. So we get very overwhelmed. We're very good at multitasking, but we also sometimes multitask too much. And it's just given us, permission to be able to slow down just a little bit so we don't burn out quite as quickly.
That's awesome. That must be very rewarding work. And obviously you were speaking from personal experience as well. So how do you recognise that? I actually found out some pretty big stats when I was over there in the UK. I can't remember off the top of my brain, but it was actually the percentage of the farming community compared to the normal, I guess your general society or population was much higher than I even expected. It was almost triple. And I was actually quite taken back by that. But then when you think it and break it down like you just have, I do see those patterns in all the people that I work with and various, on the scale very differently. But It must be quite interesting working with that approach to people. Is there a few aha moments that you are able to create?
Yes, I think a lot of the time, because if you think about it, to be diagnosed as a neurodivergent neurotype, be it dyslexia, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia. So obviously that's just an example of a few main ones that people are aware of. It's always been based on deficits. So to get your diagnosis, it's the things that individuals really struggle with in society, where, as I think my light bulb moment was, there's always a mirror to that. So for example, ADHD, to be diagnosed, well, especially with the, say, hyperactivity side, but quite often that comes with inattentive as well, is that impulsivity. So impulsive people kind of chasing that dopamine, not really thinking for future consequences. You kind of have now and not now, as I explain it. But I've noticed, particularly again with, not stereotype, but a lot of the neurodivergent ADHD women that I work with, that a lot of them aren't from a farming background. They just have this drive and passion for sustainable food systems. And they've somehow managed to have an opportunity to either buy some land or rent some land. And they know nothing about farming. They just know this is a passion for them. It's something that they want to contribute their little part of. So yeah, they get land, they buy some livestock, but they actually know nothing about farming. So it's that kind of impulsive, I'm going to quit my corporate job and go farm. I know nothing about it, but I'm sure it's going to work out. And I've made some of my best decisions in my life like that. But I think that's just one example of, say, that flip side of impulsivity. Sometimes it's actually a positive thing.
Yeah, well, I think that is one thing. The opportunities for someone to do that in the UK is so much more than here in New Zealand, like the opportunities to actually get access to land to go farm. That was one of my big takeaways from my trip there. So what are you seeing change, or maybe potentially not changing, with when it comes to new entrants or women into farming? Is there a lot more non-traditional pathways into agriculture there, or is it still the same pathways it's kind of always been?
I would say it's still a struggle. It's not, a bit like New Zealand. It's not easy. Like I say, I would love to have some land. It's like been a lifelong dream, but say it's still, unless you're from that farming background, it is difficult. But I think things are changing. We've got things like Land Match, which is a fairly new organisation, but that is, say, match people that have land and people that want to come and farm. But say it isn't, like I say, I'm sure like New Zealand, there's a lot of people that are coming to wanting to come to not the end of their farming career, but wanting to kind of take a step back. And they're looking for younger couples, families to potentially come and take over the farm, whether that be, say, in all different kinds of business agreements. But those people surprisingly struggle to find those individuals. You'd think there'd be quite a lot of people wanting to take the opportunity up, but for some reason or another, that it is still quite a difficulty.
What do you think is the main reason why there isn't a huge amount of people that are, I guess, the right fit for taking up those opportunities yet?
I think potentially just that, say, uncertainty, potentially lack of skills. Obviously, like we do need more, I think, perhaps potentially kind of mentoring programs, which some people are offering. But I guess it is quite difficult to bring to, I know the people that have done it and it does work well, but it does take some adjustment for both the current owners and the people coming in and the different ideas they have, and finding a balance in that. And I guess, say, farming is still working on small profit margins. And I think that's a barrier to quite a lot of changes in agriculture, is the fact that if something's just about working, but it is just about working, so making any major changes is a risk, isn't it? And when you've got an industry that says only just, most of the farmers I know, they do financially struggle. And any big risk that's going to change your system is just that. It's that risk and taking that leap of faith when you're not feeling particularly financially supported.
I know there's been a bit of a change, particularly in England, around the subsidies and how they're capped now. What are you seeing with farmers and their confidence around that?
Yeah, I think, well, say, because obviously, like, solve nations. So I look after England and Wales within both my role for the Soil Association and my independent work. And say England, I think we're just about getting more certainty. It's been a bit rocky, where, say, because I can see, say, DEFRA, who we deal with in England for these policies and legislations and schemes, etc. They tried to, when we Brexited, and we lost our basic payment scheme and moved over to what's called stable farming incentive, which is getting paid for more environmental options rather than per hectare of land. They did it in a way where they wanted lots of feedback from the industry, from farmers, from stakeholders about what would work, what wouldn't work, which obviously is a great idea, but it has meant that it's been a very evolving beast, that they kind of put something in place, that it's been tweaked. So we've literally just got, June, so they've released so much money for June, but those are for individuals that farm less than 50 hectares and haven't been in a scheme before. And then they're going to roll out it for everybody else in September. But the last round ran out of money with not much warning. So people were about to apply and then they just pulled it overnight. So I think that shook the confidence. But as you can see this time, people are much more prepared because I think already at least 75% of that first round has been applied for. So again, with the SFI type systems, which is based on environmental, it is encouraging more of those, say, environmental practices on farm, but it's making sure that we've got those skills there and the management and individuals actually know how to apply those, and also to apply for options that almost already work with their farm management system and try not to change that too much. But I feel like they're going in the right direction with it.
That's very interesting. So with those environmental, I guess, the payments, what you were working with around like your passion, and which is bringing the diversity into the farm system, does that align with that quite well? And it has positive outcomes for the farms in terms of profitability?
It depends on what you're putting in. So obviously with the basic payment scheme, I don't think a lot of farms are getting as much as they were from that point of view. But again, I think it's that combination of using that alongside, we have got a growing market of private nature funding as well. I'm not sure where you are in New Zealand with that, but again, there's not much kind of like verification legislation around it. So again, it's that trust around that. But say I did a master's in food security 9-10 years ago, and my dissertation was on agri-ecological farming practices and barriers to uptake and how you might overcome those on farms that farm more conventionally. And within that, the individuals that I interviewed for that said get paid for it, which is fair enough when, like I said, farms run on such small profit margins because of the bigger, wider system of economy around food prices. And it was reading about it in mainstream press, which I do think we have now. Like, say, I think 10 years ago, even when I did that, you didn't really read about regenerative agriculture or much on soil health or biodiversity in the more UK mainstream press publications, whereas now it's a weekly feature in there. So I think we're getting a lot more, I say things like soil consciousness, I quite like that word, from farmers on quite how key and important this is for those resilient systems, particularly now that, say, we are getting some more extreme weather conditions where we're getting a lot of flooding and wet winters. And then, say, we've been in a drought now for quite a while in this country where we're desperate for rain. We've got lots of brown grass everywhere. So it's, I think using some of those environmental options at a whole farm system level, again, to improve that resilience and diversity is a big part of that on farm.
And how do you think, obviously it's been 10 years since you've written your dissertation on that, how do you think things have changed other than you seeing, I guess, the general consciousness around soil health and function being talked about more in the mainstream? Are you seeing any other shifts since you did that work?
Yes, I think obviously, like previously, there was big measurements on yield and productivity on farm. So it's all about going down the pub and boasting about who's got the biggest wheat yield. Whereas now there's definitely more kind of farm walks and conversations and facilitation groups on farming that have got interest in this. So I'd say a lot of my friends and people I work with, there's a lot of, and things like social media I think is great for it. You can connect with those like-minded people. Because when I've spoken to people, again, it is that if you're wanting to transition to a different type of farming system, there's some isolation that comes with that. If all your peers and surrounding farms are still farming in a more, traditional way, as in still using a lot of inputs, there's that isolation around wanting to change on that. So I think that's a peer-to-peer exchange of skills and knowledge and like obviously I Met You at Groundswell, those kind of shows, and bringing those people together. I think that's what's changing. It's been less seen as an outsider that's doing something a little bit different. So obviously people have been doing this for years and years, whereas now there's more people doing that. And I quite like using the word finding your tribe. When you find your tribe of individuals that have the same kind of key values and outlook and approach on how they want to do things, that's when I think this transition grows.
Yeah, I think that's, from my brief experience there, was definitely, there's a lot more maturity in the space than there is in New Zealand. We still definitely have that isolation, and it's very hard for people who do start to do something that's considered non-traditional or conventional. How have you gone about supporting people through that phase? Because it is really tough when you almost kind of get excommunicated from your community just because you want to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, so it's something I come across both in the farm advice side of my work and also my neurodivergent coaching. And I think, particularly everybody, but again, there's less females in the industry. So if you're a female farming alongside farming in a way that's not like your surrounding farms, again, I think it is just that human connection, isn't it? And ideally, that's a geographical human connection. But if not, we've got some amazing, WhatsApp groups where people to keep in touch and online. And it's just that feeling of just putting like-minded people together. So I find that when I go onto farm to advise on soil, crops, doing environmental observations, quite often it is unofficial kind of coaching session on just finding those networks for people so that you can have those conversations with people and compare both things that have gone wrong and learn from each other, as well as things that have worked on your farm for you. So yeah, I think it's about that networking in whichever way that feels comfortable for you. Some people love meeting up and doing it that way, but again, other people are quite happy to use social media or WhatsApp for that. But I think it is just trying to find those individuals. And again, maybe it's because I am neurodivergent and like attracts like, but I do tend to be mainly in those circles of those very curious, innovative, pattern recognition individuals with that kind of justice sensitivity of, really want to drive this forward.
Well, it's that old thing is your vibe attracts your tribe, isn't it? You talked
exactly,
about earlier.
Yes.
And you become magnetic to those people who are of a similar persuasion or interest, which is the cool thing about the world. I think that's one of the real powerful parts about this, or just social media in general, is the ability to connect with people all around the world and share what's working and what's not, and just have that connection. I don't know how many people I've met on my journeys that I've known through social media, and then you meet them in person, but it's almost like it's not the first time you met them. You've known them for so long. It's a weird sensation.
Yeah, so sometimes I think you forget. You're like, I've done this a few times. Like, have I met you in real life, or have I just seen you on little squares a few times?
Yeah. And I'm sure it's very much the same for farmers as well. There's some great people out there doing some awesome work around sharing their farming story and all the challenges that farmers are having on social media. And I think it's great because it seems like less people have a connection through family or friends that are farmers or work within the industry nowadays. So that, I think, is a very important role that farmers can play as an education piece.
Yeah, it is. It's all about finding your community, isn't it? And I think obviously that crosses over into the reducing the isolation and the well-being and the mental health part of our industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the big part in itself. So you like to talk a lot about diversity of people on the land. Do you see that has actually outcomes for, or better outcomes for, our ecology, not just the social point, as well as, I guess, the functional parts of our landscape? What role does having diversity in our landscape of people matter?
Steve, you've got different neurotypes coming into that with different ideas and different approaches and different ideas. Again, it's that innovation and ideas and creativity and problem solving. And, you've got individuals that their brain works in a very meticulous way of attention to detail and organisation and forward planning, and they're really good for certain areas. And then you've got those big thinkers and creative and curious, and you need all types of individuals to work as a team, don't you? Like I say, within my soil association role as a farming advisor, our Christmas party last year was looking at our different brain types with different colours, and it was fascinating to see. But you need all those different approaches to work together to make a team, to make these changes and drive whatever change you're looking at forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about it as like, I can battle away at something that I don't really like, but if I have a team member that really loves a part of it and it's their passion project, they're going to be much more efficient at doing that job or that piece of work than I am, and I'm going to enjoy it more. So why don't I let them thrive rather than trying to do it myself in battle?
Yeah, exactly. And it is about like, we don't need to be perfect and amazing at everything. It's realizing where your strengths lie, and then also not being afraid to ask for help or assistance where potentially you struggle a little bit. I think, again, we don't have to do everything all the time, and giving ourselves self-compassion for that. So again, I'm a very big thinker, lots of ideas, come up with a million business ideas, like just having a bath. But I need those individuals with the executive function. So executive function is something that particularly neurodivergent individuals struggle with. It's that organization and planning and attention to detail bit. But I've got colleagues, and even in my personal life, people that are very good at that. So they can take a step back and be like, you've got this amazing idea, but how's that going to work in practice? And I think, again, I do quite a lot of coordination of farmer-led research, and within that is the same thing. I saw it actually at Groundswell, because we're part of the Adopt Hub, which is some funding for farmers that have got farmer-led research ideas on farm. And I had so many individuals come to me with a million big ideas, but it's also having people on the team that can take that step back and be like, how's this going to work? And just putting those steps in place before getting too excited and carried away. So we need passion, but we also need people that go, wait a minute, how's this going to work in practice?
Oh, absolutely. I love a big thinker, because I'm just like, how do you come up with this stuff sometimes? How does, for a farmer listening to this and they've got a team, how would they go about understanding, I guess, how their team works and where they thrive and who's a big thinker and who's really good at the details? What's a good process for them to undertake to figure that out?
I suppose it will come through in personality a little bit, so you can see it. Those ones that just, I don't know, you give them an instruction and they just run off passionately to go and do it, and others that really need to kind of sit there and need like full step-by-step instruction. But I think it's mainly, again, if I'm talking to a farm organisation that have a variety of different, it doesn't even be neurodivergence, does it? Just humans, people working on the farm that work differently. It's about asking them. Sometimes that takes a little bit of teasing out, because quite often we've not stopped to even think about what do we need, what accommodations do we need, how do we work better. But I think it is just those regular check-ins. And again, it's things like instructions, reminders. I'd say I think it's employees feeling that you're a safe person to come to. So say they are struggling with a particular task, or you've given them instructions and they've run off, then gone, oh, I haven't actually remembered some of those instructions, rather than them feeling like they just have to guess their way through and potentially mess it up, that you are someone that they could ring or WhatsApp and be like, just tell me again. Or kind of, if you have given instructions, just a quick follow-up on WhatsApp or something. So I think that's the key thing, is that again, it's that communication and feeling like people can come to you and say, in my workday, I need this. Obviously, they need to be reasonable, but it's having that relationship so that people feel comfortable to come and do that. Because it's not a copy and paste. Like, you have got certain tools and strategies that work more for certain ways people work than others, but everyone's an individual. So it's that two-way communication, ongoing communication about what works for them personally.
I think the key part there is everyone is quite individual. So how do we, as leaders on our farm and our team, how do we go about not doing it in a way that doesn't become like micromanaging, even though you're trying to do them in a place of being very communicative, making sure they feel supported? How do you stop going over that point and end up feeling like you're micromanaging?
Yes, again, I think again, I can only speak for ADHD individuals, but I need some structure, but I can't be micromanaged because I hate that. So it is a very fine balance between the two. But again, so I just think everything in life is communication, isn't it? So making sure, I know like farm life gets so busy, but it is those regular check-ins, having a space where you can come together, have whiteboards, have potentially WhatsApp chats, And it is, say, it's an evolving thing. So you might think, oh, I'm going to try this, and it doesn't work. And again, if you have got, which is quite often, say, regardless to neurotype, different types of people on one farm of how they work. So it is finding that balance of something that works for everybody within that team.
And is that very much also the approach you would take to, I guess, each individual farmer you're working with as well, was figuring out kind of their communication strengths or what they like?
Yeah, I think that's it is a kind of, I suppose, something that I feel is a strength of mine, is that, again, I am good at that pattern recognition of people and those soft skills. So even though I've got the technical knowledge around farming systems and agronomy and soil and cropping, actually, I feel like I've always been an accidental coach my entire career without realising it, because I've always approached each individual with, say, that kind of active listening and not gone in there telling them what they should do, but actually listening to and meeting them where they're at. And I think that's a key as well. Like, it's meeting a farmer or individual where they're at. So you can't go in and make a whole farm from being very intensively inputted to regenerative overnight. It has to be little steps at a time. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's a very incremental process.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I've been visiting more farms recently that have probably gone down the regenerative approach or the biological, whatever you'd like to call it. But they've stuck. So they've gone from doing very high inputs to I'm going to do none now, and we have to stick to that. We can't, use the tools that are available to us. And then you can see the system's not firing when they could just invest a little bit of money in something that'll keep the system firing along. And I guess that's where you come back to coaching them where they're at. It's like, hey, actually, you do have tools here, and regenerative is actually about the outcomes, not the way that you get there. And I think people get excited at the start, like you say, and run off, and then they become evangelical, and then they realise that actually they can use some of these tools to themselves. So how do you approach those situations where people want to go full hog into it and just cut everything out?
Yeah, I think like anything in farming, it's context, isn't it? It's even ploughing. Like plough isn't necessarily an evil thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's very contextual to the situation. So I think it's about approaching every farm, field differently. I think that's the issue. We take some of these movements, be it regenerative principles, agroecological principles, and that copy and paste approach, whereas actually it very much depends on your climate, your soil type, your cropping, your management, to which parts of those. Although might be a bit of a weird analogy, but I'm quite interested in the kind of microbiome in the gut and the soil and the kind of relationship between the two. And I always think, like, if you go from eating hardly any fibre to suddenly having lots of fibre, we know the consequences of that. We get very bloated and gassy and uncomfortable. So it's the same on our farms. If your farms have kind of been getting lots of high input nitrogen, and that's what they say, that's the environment they're used to, and then all of a sudden you take that away and start using lots of different approaches, they're going to be like, that's too much overnight. And that's why, say, it's a biological, ecological, natural system that needs to be built up slowly for, say, the environment to adjust. I've got examples of people wanting to do integrated pest management. So they've suddenly planted a load of wildflowers in year one. They stopped using all inputs, and then not being happy because they've lost quite a lot of crop, because those kind of ecological systems that are needed there, those populations can't build up in 1 year. It's nature and it takes time. And I think we do just need to realise that mindset, that any healing of the land or that building up of those more natural populations, we need to balance that out. It's not going to happen overnight, and we need to, say, take time to build that up. We could do things that potentially kind of speed that up. So obviously putting things like grass lays down in, but again, it's against the profitability, isn't it? So I know, like, if you put, like, say, a multi-species lay or herbal lay down for a couple of years, that can really speed up the process of, say, the soil health and the soil structure, but you need to balance that out with actually your cash crop and making money on the farm. So you don't want to be doing that on every field on your farm in year one. Otherwise, you're going to be producing no crops to sell.
And you could spend a lot of money for no income. There's not many people who can afford to do a herbal layer across the whole farm.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. It has to be a thing, isn't it? Like with sustainability, it needs to be a profitable business as well. Otherwise, it's not resilient. It won't keep going. So I think we do, like you said about that ideology, but we do need to find that balance between the two. I've always liked an integrated approach to these things rather than kind of, we all, and again, I did my master's in food security and I did it over 5 years. So I did it while I was working full time as an agronomist, having children. And it was one of the most depressing 5 years of my life because all I heard about was problems. And again, quite often with these things, we know what the solutions are. It's a bit like being ADHD. It's not a knowing problem, it's a doing problem. And that's the thing. It's fine to actually implement these practices that we know work, because I think we've got enough science and research behind it now. There's obviously always more space for more research. And it's something that's been, especially in the UK, I don't know about New Zealand, agricultural research has been very underfunded. But we do know a lot of this. It's just being able to implement that on our farms in a practical way.
Yeah, well, the funding here has also been probably limited for probably the return in terms of what it could be, and the independent research is definitely very lacking. In terms of that food system stuff, you obviously worked away on it for 5 years. Have you seen a shift in the resilience since you've done that work, or is it still much the same? Because I think you have exactly the same problems that we have in New Zealand, which is kind of seems to be the same problems about food systems just about anywhere you go now in the Western world.
Yeah, so I think obviously COVID highlighted that very much, that we are very reliant on imports, especially for those, say, kind of the fruit and veg side of things in the UK. We don't really, I think we're 56%. I think the other statistic is like food secure. I think we can feed ourselves until August if you look at it in a calendar year. And again, it's all about that short supply chain, isn't it? We just haven't got the infrastructure for that short supply chain. We're very much reliant on imported products. But I think our current weather systems over the last few years has really highlighted that, though, from an actual on-the-ground farming approach as well. I think a lot of farmers whenever I've spoken to farmers in the past about where was that moment of, I'm not sure I want to carry on doing the practices on the farm that I'm currently doing, like something needs to change. And that's when they've started getting more interested in that, looking at ground root issues rather than getting those sticking plasters. And I think more and more of that. So I worked last week at a show called the Royal Welsh, which is like the biggest agricultural show in Wales. It's a huge event in Wales for Welsh farmers. And I think every conversation had a theme about the lot of livestock and grazing in Wales, but it's a lot of brown grass. And I had a lot of conversations on soil health and more diverse grass lays. So I think we're now almost, hands are being forced to kind of look at that system change of, it's not to say it's obviously it's multi-pronged, isn't it? It's an issue of relying on imports, but also what we're able to produce in our own country. And at the moment, with this weather being so varied, the crops that we have grown for a very long time are struggling. Because like you say, what we would say July, and all the cereals were looking very desiccated very early on this year compared to normal. And say most fields are looking very brown, whereas say your more herbal lay diverse grass fields are the ones that actually are looking healthier. You can actually see that when you look around because of that diversity in it and say the attributes that brings.
What's the key difference there? Is it taking more of a systems approach to working with their farm, or is it just the fact that they're running a bit more diversity and allowing the soil to do its natural job?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously, again, it does tie in with, say, the SFI, because there are payments for things like, say, I did want to make herbal lays or species rich or encouraging more diversity. But I'm not sure about New Zealand, but we very much on livestock farms in this country went down a ryegrass and clover route. So most livestock farms are ryegrass and clover. Obviously, the clover is great because, say, it does fix nitrogen for you, but the ryegrass is, say, short-rooted, quick growing, but very much likes that high input nitrogen. Whereas I think now, so again, it's say, when you say whole farm approach, it's just starting with small bits. Like we said, we don't change everything overnight, but it's starting to think about the why. So why is the ryegrass no longer working for us with the extreme weathers that we're having? And if you have herbal lays with, say, those kind of deep rooting root species in there, ones that are more drought resilient, that is going to fare better with these extremes than that, say, monocrop that we've been very much heavily relying on historically.
Are you seeing, obviously, with this, people are starting to be more interested in that? And is there kind of like that generational, traditional knowledge from, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 generations coming back through that actually some of those practices are still quite useful in today's farming world?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think as those say, the systems that we use, the systems that obviously have been used in organic farming and predated when the kind of industrial revolution. It's quite interesting. I went to Leeds University in the UK are doing trials at the moment. They've got kind of in-field trials of regenerative practices. So they're stacking the 5 principles in a field over. They've just extended it to 2030, I think, but over a period of time. And they said when I went up there for this, say, open day, that they were going through a store cupboard and they found research, basically the same researchers now, all handwritten out with very similar results to the work they're doing now. So that's fascinating, isn't it? That they say they put the posters up, like the hand-drawn graphs and everything, that this work has been done previously before computers and all done by hand, but the results that they're seeing from those are very similar to what we're seeing now. So again, I think it goes back to, we've got technology for more potentially precise measurements now. But again, we do know a lot of the answers. It's just how do we implement them in a way that don't put farms at risk financially? I think that's one of the biggest barriers, like I said before. And the skills, it's knowing those skills as well. It's a different skill set, isn't it? To what's like, say, fix up. So I did 3 degrees in agriculture and I'm BASIS qualified, which in the UK, you have to be BASIS qualified legally to be an agronomist and be able to sell and advise on fertilizers and plant protection products. But I'm now doing the soil food web course because even though I had all that education, I feel that's a gap. That kind of soil food web, biology, ecology side of things is something that we weren't really taught. It was mainly the chemical, physical side. So again, if I wasn't taught it, so were a lot of other farmers and advisors and agronomists in the industry. And I guess the research wasn't there either. I think it's something that's very much what the, say, ecology does in the soil and the fungi and the bacteria and protozoa, how they work together is relatively new science, learning actually quite how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, what's that quote? It's like in a teaspoon of soil, there's like 6 billion or something different microorganisms, and we know less about that than what's happening in the ocean. So you kind of go, okay, we've got a lot to learn here. When you started out like learning and your agronomist journey, were you always kind of this way inclined, or was it just naturally your pattern recognition and trying to find the root causes for clients?
No, I suppose I came in for it from a slightly different angle because I managed an organic farm. So I was working on organic farm, and I've also been interested in more the kind of that land sharing aspect rather than the land sparing. So obviously over the years, different environmental schemes, some have encouraged that biodiversity on the outside, farming in the middle. And now I think we're perhaps moving towards perhaps that more land sharing of realising that actually we need those things like beneficials closer to the crop because they can't actually go that far for the system to work. So I came from being very interested in that because again, it's that systems thinking. I think I've always been a systems thinker, but when I started working for, say, an agronomy firm as an environmental advisor for them, I wanted to learn about that side because I thought it'd be really useful to be able to sit on the fence a little bit, excuse the pun, of understanding both systems of, again, so we can kind of, and I think we are doing that. I think that's something I have noticed. You said about things changing, that we're coming closer together. There's less them and us. It's say, obviously we had kind of organic over here and high input over there. And it's like, you're doing it wrong. Whereas now I think we are slowly, and that's what Groundswell, that's why I love Groundswell. It's one of my favourite shows because it's such a diverse show. You've got kind of your more traditional farmers there, but alongside, say, individuals that say kind of your market gardeners, your smallholders, people that want to farm in a more agroecological way, organic farmers, and everyone comes together with a shared passion and values and learning from each other, which is where I believe for a long time was where we need to go.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic melting pot of many different types of people in one place, and it's just kind of the energy, and everyone's so happy to talk to each other about all the different things that they're doing or seeing there, which is really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I always come away energized, if you're feeling a little bit like, oh, why am I doing this every day? This is why I'm doing it, because there's a whole tribe of people out there who share my passions.
Oh, absolutely. And like I say, it does seem like general agronomy is starting to kind of close the gap a little bit. People are interested in how the biology can actually support the chemical. And I think to be good in the ecological space like yourself, you do need to be able to sit the fence and understand both sides and how they're useful.
Yes.
It's not, I can't look over there because it's bad. It's like actually you need to understand the reasons why those things work and how they work as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're working with a farmer, how would you measure a resilient system or a system that is performing well?
Yeah, so again, it's moving away, isn't it, I think, from that yield mindset. Obviously, we need to lead a good productive system, but it needs to be balanced. I think a lot of farmers now, I've seen it, are looking at gross margin. So it's more of a measure of, it's not about maximising output by maximising input. It is looking at, say, from the economic point of view, those gross margins. Because obviously, if you're buying in less inputs, that's less cost going out. So you necessarily don't need to potentially have such a yield on the other side of it to balance that out. So from that point of view, that's resilience. But also that system just working naturally together. So say a lot of problems I talk to farmers about or see in field are really quite common ones. We have a lot, especially in the area that I geographically live in, we have a lot of clay soil, so heavy clay soil. So quite often it's flooding in the winter, then it's all cracked and dried out now. I'd say it's very anaerobic, not much oxygen in there because it's clay and all stuck together. You've got, when you do actual chemical analysis of what's in the soil, quite often quite a lot of things are locked up or really high or really low, because obviously it retains it. I'd say resilience, I think, is about just slowly changing that so that you can rely less on buying inputs in, which is increased in price, and there's also a lot of resistance to a lot of these chemicals now, and being able to have that more, I don't want to use the word holistic, but system where actually it's balanced itself out so that you are spending less money and whilst maintaining, similar yield. I don't think that happens overnight, but I know systems have been doing this for years and years, and they have achieved that, where they've got to that point where actually their yields are the same as they were when they were a high input system. But again, I think it is that, what the word I'm thinking of, but expectation of overnight. Like I said before, it's definitely a bit of time. But I think a resilient system is one where you're more in control. I would say that is the word. You're more in control of what you're doing on your farm. We are an industry where we're buying inputs from someone and then we're selling our crop to the same person. So again, it feels quite controlled in that way. And it's just the way the industry has been set up. But I think it's taking back control of your farm and putting practices in where you're not relying so much on those, outsourcing, that actually you're able to keep things more within the farm gate and still have a, resilient, productive farming system.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. So if we're a farmer who's, feeling particularly overwhelmed and they're wanting to build a more diverse and resilient farm system, where should they start? Because it can be quite overwhelming looking at all the options you've got. Yeah,
it is. And that's the thing. There's a lot of information out there now, but then sometimes that information is just very overwhelming, isn't it? So I would say, again, I would also say looking at people that are kind of not being scared to go on those farm walks or reach out on social media and to learn from peers. I think historically we've been a bit like, I'm working on my farm over here by myself, and we've not been the best at collaborating potentially. So again, I think it's that, I'm a farming advisor, I've been doing this 20 plus years, but I'd love to be a farmer, but I'm not in that situation. So again, a lot of my job is connecting those individuals that are and do work the land and have tried it. So I'd say the first step is potentially reaching out to people, and I'd say the benefit of social media, that are farming in a way that you would like to farm, and asking, again, one thing about people doing it before you is you can learn from their mistakes. And I think that's the honest conversations we need to have. It's not just boasting about what went really well. It's also, I completely fucked this up. And so you can avoid doing that too. And I think most people I've discovered that most people are quite happy to talk in this space. So I'd say reaching out, I'd say be the first thing to learn through that peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, but also to get into just observing. So again, it's that observing, it's slowing down. Again, this kind of comes into my coaching somatic work as well, which is because neurodivergence is a lot of funky nervous system wiring. And I think we're now human doings, what human beings a lot of the time, we spend so much time in our head and not in our body. We've always got the next thing to do and the next thing to do, and we're rushing around. That actually, it's actually properly looking at your farm and observing. And again, I know that takes time, but you can say habit stack it when you're doing a job or you're sat on the tractor. And again, I think, say, this is what a strength of quite a lot of neurodivergent individuals, again, is they're very good at that pattern spotting. But it's like, oh, I've got that particular weed issue in that area. Why might that be? And then again, and I'm already, like I say, I'm still surprised, again, at the show I worked at last week, people approached me with their chemical analysis from the lab of the different indices and their pH. And I said, oh, what's the soil structure looking like? Oh, I don't know. And again, I think we are moving forward with that, but it is like, and I know we have such a long to-do list all the time, but it is just digging into the soil and using our senses and smelling it and looking at the structure and using things like a VES, which is a visual evaluation of soil structure. Again, there's guides online for that, and looking for worms. So I think it starts with observing of what you've already got and then thinking, oh, what might be causing this issue, and taking it from there rather than, like I say, speeding ahead, trying to adopt all these amazing factors that everyone keeps talking about, just slowing it down and taking it a step at a time.
Absolutely. I think somatic is a word that doesn't actually get utilised in or spoken about in farming at all. Could you give us a bit of a quick overview of that, and then also a way that farmers can start bringing a little bit of that practice into their day, whether it is just digging a hole once a day to start observing what's happening?
Yes, again, I would say, ADHD brain. I'm also doing a course on somatic counselling at the moment. Just to add to my string of course, things that I'm doing. And I think that's part of the issue. Obviously, we talk, like, again, mental health and well-being, again, is another struggle that we've had in agriculture and still do. But again, I think if people use the word mindfulness, it's almost seen as a bit woo-woo. So that's something that I like to do in my coaching practice, is actually bring these things in a practical way that farmers can understand. But it's not just farmers. I'm the same. So I'm a mum of 2 boys. I'm renovating a house. I've got my own business. Again, it's not having to think all the time that unless you do something like, a bit like if you want to start running, people think, oh, I don't run 5-10K 4 times a week, it's not worth it. Or I need to meditate for a whole hour. And that isn't the case. And I think farmers are particularly lucky that obviously they're surrounded by nature. And again, nature is very good for regulating our nervous system. And again, I think that's why a lot of neurodivergent individuals get drawn to it, because obviously we used to live in nature, and our nervous system recognizes that, and it naturally helps us slow down. So I quite often advise, even if you just when you're rushing around thinking this needs to be done, that needs to be done, if you could just, I don't know, take a flask of tea with you and just stop your tractor for 10 minutes and get out and see what birds that you can hear. And that very naturally kind of gets you out of more that, a lot of us are stuck in what they call fight or flight now, where we're like, feel like we're being chased by a bear, that anxiety of rushing from one thing to the next, and we kind of live in that chronic state, which isn't good for our mental health or our physical health. It's a surprising amount of physical symptoms that come from having a dysregulated nervous system. So if you can do just little practices every day, something that works for you, so it doesn't have to be an hour sitting meditating, but just, even if you set an alarm on your phone, like when you first wake up before you have to rush out and do your first job, just take a couple of minutes to be in your body. And say again, when you're out and about, noticing plants, listening to birds. I know it all sounds a bit woo-woo, but there is science behind it. And it just means that, again, so I think obviously quite a trendy word is burnout, but there's a lot of truth behind it. We're just, our current kind of lifestyle and times, we're just, say, always switched on, aren't we? We're always available through our phones. We're all juggling a million things. And I think it is just realizing we have a body sometimes. And as weird as that sounds, I think we forget that we have a body. We're in our head so much that it's just that, say, grounding yourself. And I think, say, being on farm and having so much nature around you is the perfect opportunity for that.
I totally agree. I think that's a great place to wrap the podcast. But one of the practices that I've learned is when you're out on a farm is to try and listen as far as you can, like see how far you can listen and just see like the noises and it's quite incredible how far your listening can go once you tune in and then how much you come into your body at that point, which is it doesn't take long, which is a great thing to do as well. But, and I think that's a really key point is like, you know, we see a lot around mindfulness and it's like you have to do X, Y, Z and stack all these things. But it's a 3 to 5 minute practice a day and that has a huge outcome for your somatic side of yourself, but also your mental health and physical health.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think say kind of that and connection are two of the key things.
Yeah. So I wrap up my podcast with one quick fire question for everyone, and it's what's one belief or principle that keeps you grounded no matter what season you're in?
Yeah, I think so. I like that word season because say that kind of I think of us as cycles. So one thing that keeps me grounded, I think I know it's quite general, but just being out in nature. I never get bored of seeing an insect when I'm out on farm doing observations, or even a cow or a sheep. I've been doing this job for a long time now, but I just take joy in those little things. I say particularly seeing different insects and bugs and kind of watching them work. That's the one thing that really brings me joy and grounds me.
I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for the chat today, Karen. I've really enjoyed this. How can listeners connect with you or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn as Karen Fisher. So if you put farming next to it, I'm one of the ones that come up. And I've also got an Instagram called harvesting.potentials. Awesome. So if you look on there, you can find me there as well.
I'll link those below in the comments underneath this so people can go straight to finding you. But thank you once again. It's been a very interesting chat and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.